This is Jack Spillane from the New Bedford Light, and I'm here today with Candida Rose and Iva Brito, two New Bedford Cabo Verdean artists, or Cape Verdean artists, as old men like me who can't change their pronunciation are apt to say. And we're here to talk today about Cabo Verdean women and art, and specifically off of sections that Candida and Iva wrote in this book, Cabo Verdean Women Writing Remembrance, Resistance, and Revolution, which is part of a scholarly study of the raising of consciousness of Cabo Verdean women and their contributions to Cape Verde and that society and its diaspora across the world. So welcome, Candida and Iva.
Thank
Jack,
you.
thank you so much for having us both here.
Likewise, it's an honor to be here.
I'm so excited to do this. So the book seems like a tribute to all Cape Verdean women who came before, whose singing, whose writing, whose artistry has never really been recognized. Am I understanding that correctly?
Absolutely. This book, I'm privileged and honored to be part of this book. And it's a compilation of different artists, different Cape Verdean women that was edited by Teresa Silva Limanev and Amina Pilgrim, two amazing women that started the Poderosa Conference, a semi-annual conference that celebrates Cape Verdean women and all the amazing things that we do, and as a space to unite women and share some of the issues and challenges, as well as celebrate our beauty and strength. And that's what this book is as well. It tells different stories about our heritage, our culture, our strength, and our unity. So that's a compilation of our different stories together.
Yeah, wonderful.
And yes, Eva and I and another young woman, Shauna Barboza, and a few others were able to contribute the sort of the artistic piece of it. But this certainly, the book delves into politics and all of the different, areas, education, all of the different areas where Cape Verdean women have done so much and have helped make so many strides, but have gone unsung. And so this book certainly is, like you said, Mrs. Spillane, a tribute to those who have come before, and to help lift those who are coming after us as well. So yeah.
In the introduction, it talks about Cape Verdean women and the way that they've been portrayed simplistically in popular media, and not even recognized in some of the African scholarly and literature that's been written. Can you speak about that? This is almost this invisibility of Cape Verdean women.
Go ahead, Eva.
I'm sure we can piggyback amongst one another. Yeah, I think that's definitely a reality for our Cape Verdean culture as Cape Verdean women, that so often we've been seen behind the scenes and not really valued. Our culture, we have to be real, comes from a very machismo culture in which men were the ones that were in the front lines, men were the ones whose voice was valued. And we need to start changing that narrative, because behind every strong man, there's a strong woman, and behind every strong woman, there's a strong man, right? And so often when we talk to women about their families, the mother is what they say holds the family down. Yes, the father may have provided and done other things, but that strength of the woman, it's like that core, that pillar within the family unit. I'm working on a project right now with Cape Verdean women that were part of the PICG movement, the movement that Cabral led. But there was Cape Verdean warriors that also supported the men in different ways. And when the stories came out, their stories didn't get told. So there were so many women that helped literally in battle, also helped support the family and support messages from one to another with Cabral. So that's just one example of so many of how women were instrumental in our culture. And I think if you ask most women, when they talk about Cape Verdean culture, it's the matriarchal structure that came through that has really supported the family in some ways, in many ways, I should say. Candida, feel free to.
Right. And, and as we talk about Eva just mentioned, in the independence struggle, when you look back, as you read some of these articles and you look back at, we'll talk about the poetry and literature, for instance, when you look at, again, in history, and you look at when women began putting their ideas and their thoughts and their writings into certain publications, they weren't the ones that were that were acknowledged when these publications started coming to light. And so it was, of course, it was the men's contributions, and it was the men's literature that, and the men's poetry that was saying, this is the first person that did this, and this is the first person that did that. But when you really look into the history, it was the women who actually were the first ones. But again, they're not the ones that are acknowledged in that way. So it's definitely time to change that view, and to let people know that our women have always been there, holding up that banner of moving forward and strength.
And of course, that's not unique to Cape Verdean culture. Women being behind the scenes has been the story in much of human culture. We're seeing that debate played out right now with the nomination of the first Black woman to be on the Supreme Court. You wonder why it's taken so long, and it's just that's the way that culture has been. I was just surprised, Candida, when I read your chapter, just about how many women singers have been internationally known, and we didn't even know they were Cape Verdean, and have in all different genres. Can you talk about some of the women who impressed you, who've been out there singing?
Oh my goodness, yes. When I started doing my research, actually, my research started early 2000s when I was going to UMass Dartmouth. But when I did my work for my master's, when I started looking into groups that I've already known, like the Tune Weavers, for instance. I've known of the Tune Weavers, they're Mr. Sylvia, who is local, and I've known him, for a long time. When I started really looking into the group, and I realized that his former wife, Margot Sylvia, was the one who actually wrote the song "Happy Birthday, Baby." I really was kind of floored, because I didn't realize that she was the one who had written it. And so if I'm not knowing it as a Cape Verdean American woman, and here's this Cape Verdean American woman who had basically a million seller, in the 50s and 60s or whatever, it's time we know these things, because how are we going to grow ourselves if we don't know that our ancestors and the people that came before us and the women that came before us already did this and opened doors. So it was really wonderful to start looking at some of these women. And of course, Ms. Vicky Vieira, I knew that she was an amazing singer, but I didn't realize how much she had done. And then, knowing that she went to, the Smithsonian in 1995, along with, the men and her and Selena Pereira, God rest her soul, how they really helped. They were the voices, right? They were the voices that helped to bring the music to life. So I'm very proud to be able to talk a little bit more, to say more about them in my writing and in my research.
And it was both pop culture and things like jazz. I read about, Cabo Verdean women going to Portugal and France and all kinds of places in Europe.
Yes. And I still have, I have some work to do with diasporas aside from the United States. So I can't really speak to all of the names of the women that are out there, but they're in all of these different places. But there are certainly, and of Sean Montero, for instance, you know, she's here in the United States, but she has definitely made an impression in Italy, for instance, and she goes, I don't know if she's still doing it, but she was going out to Italy every year to do, she does a concert and she does workshops, and, you know, she sort of does a residency in one of the cities in Italy. So she's very, and I know there's the Verve magazine, which is the big jazz magazine, even in the United States, who talks about all of the jazz musicians and how they're contributing. And there's a Verve Italy, and Verve, it's not only a magazine, but it was also a record label. And she was noted as, you know, one of the best jazz singers, not only in Italy, but in the world at one point. So, and she's of Cape Verdean descent. So, and I was trying to actually get her to the Creole Jazz Festival in Cabo Verde, because, you know, she's certainly a pillar of Cape Verdean jazz, or what I like to call Cabo jazz. So yeah, it's just, when people don't know, they just don't know. And so that's why I think this book is so important, that people need to start to know, at least.
Yes, I would recommend anybody get this book, because even if you get it online, because it's the sheer list of numbers of Cape Verdean musicians is just astounding. Iva, are there Cape Verdean poets and visual artists that have inspired you also and reflective in your work?
I think of Cape Verdean poets. I love the work of Vera Duarte. I've actually met her and saw and heard her work, and so she's one that's inspiring. There's also a lot of incoming poets, Shauna Barboza. But I think, you know, as Cape Verdean women, we are poetry in the way that we walk and the way that we dance, and that's just part of who we are. So it's not just to say one poet or this woman. As Criollas, I think we embrace an artistic sense in all the things that we do. And so it's not one thing, but the beauty of our culture just is poetic to me, if that makes sense.
It does. That's a poetic way of looking at life and experience.
That was so beautifully said. So beautifully said.
I just have to ask you, Iva, that wonderful picture in back of you, if you could talk a little bit about that, because it really just touches me. It's wonderful.
Sure, thank you. So this is one of my pieces. It's called Music. It's actually from my book, Essence, Tones, Whispers, and Shouts. And in 2019, I was honored to be an art in residence for the New Bedford Whaling City National Park. And as part of that residency, I challenged myself to pick 10 poems out of my book and transform them into images, being a visual and performing artist. And it was an interesting challenge because never done that before. Usually I would use image to inspire me to write a poem, but not the opposite. So this poem, I guess the little history behind that, this came about with the late Armstead Christian that many folks knew and loved. Used to have these events, what he would call like jazzoetry, which would be a combination of a live jazz band that he would perform in and sometimes sing, as well as have a poet come up. So I performed with him in those events. And so for one of those events, he had asked me to do a piece. It was a Valentine's Day event. And this is a piece that came out, Music. And now it's transformed into an image. And in the piece, if you read my book, I mentioned all these different instruments, and compare it to love and lovemaking and all this, sensual. And then I thought about what really can represent, beauty in that way. And I thought about the beauty of the women's body and how it is music. It has curves, it has flow, it has this essence. And so that was the challenge many times, and how you change one form to another, but still keep whole and true. And that's how I defined it. So it plays a little bit with the violin, but also the beauty of the women. So that's the history. So I look at it and I think about how it started and where it's at. So that's music.
That's interesting. I at first thought it was a guitar, but a violin or a guitar.
Either one. I mean, I was playing with it, so either one works.
Yeah.
I see when I see it, see, everybody sees things differently, right? So when I see it, I see a stand-up bass, you know, the only thing that's not there are the strings, obviously, but I see a stand-up bass. So it's, you know, all of those things, I think.
That's the beauty of art, right? That
right?
you can see one piece and have a million
yes.
stories.
Yeah.
I've heard, when I did my exhibit and I showed this piece, there was many conversations about this piece and what it invoked in folks, because it's really simple, but also very poetic and has a lot of emotions that it evokes. So different folks had different things to say. Interesting.
Yeah.
It's
Well, I
really
guess for me,
inspiring.
like I love the bass. I wish I could play the bass. So
Me too.
I guess, right.
It's really inspired.
It's beautiful. It's very
the
beautiful.
curves of the instrument and the curves of the woman, just wonderful. I want to pick up on this term Criollas Poderosas that's used in the book. If I understand it, and I don't really understand Creole, but it's powerful Cape Verdean women. Is that what I mean? And the author uses that as a term of consciousness, I guess. Can someone talk about Criollas Poderosas? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Go ahead.
Criollas Poderosas. Yes, and it's basically it's the empowered Cape Verdean woman is if you had to put it sort of in a if you had to kind of bring it down a little bit, I guess you could say. But yeah, it talks about, as Eva mentioned earlier, the resilience, the strength, the courage, how women, Cape Verdean women particularly, have come through, have held you know, the country pretty much on their shoulders, and it's, you know, that strength, and it's you know, poder is to be able to do, to the ability to do, right? And you know, so we have the ability to do anything and everything that we need to keep our culture and our family and our community strong and healthy. We are poderosas.
Absolutely. Totally agree with everything Candida just said. Poderosa being a state of mind, a upliftment that we carry, a sense of perseverance, of courage. And you think of a lot of the challenges that women of Cape Verdean descent have faced, from, you know, prior to slavery, during slavery, and now. And just knowing, dealing with this transnational and immigration, knowing that your child might be in a different country and you may not be able, and how do you provide? So there's all these different lenses that we now, issues that we have then and now, but always carrying this sense of strength within there. And, you know, you look at the cover of the book and you see the woman's eyes, and it's this just knowing, like, I have you, I got you. And that's what I think the Poderosa strength is, that there's this inner knowing and strength that regardless of the winds of life, I will be able to withstand myself and my community and my family, and holding that, being that web for that. And I speak to that in my poem, Criolla. And it's the first line of it, she's grounded in her roots. So being grounded in our Afrocentric, rich history of Cape Verde, that regardless of where you go, my perspective is, whether I'm in Europe, whether I'm in the United States, where I'm in, you know, Indonesia, I'm a Criolla first. Right. And that is something we carry in our heart and our soul. And that is that knowing that that strength is within us, and we carry that lineage and strength to the next generation, to the next woman, to know that that is your base. Yeah.
It's interesting because Criolla, or would it be Criollo for a man, it's not a term that Americans are that familiar with, and you know, it really is a unique background, is it not?
Being a Criolla, you mean?
Well, the Cape Verdean archipelago, you know, off the coast of Africa, the people are unique, people that are not entirely African, not entirely European, they had their own.
Right, because of the transatlantic slave
Yes.
movement that happened, Cape Verde was a central spot that people from all over the world came. So because of that, if you see Cape Verdeans, we vary in skin tone and hair texture and our appearance because of that. There's so many, there's a Jewish cemeteries in some of the islands because it was a very much a Jewish influence, and other folks from all sorts of parts of the world. So yes, the Criolla is a mix, and that's what Creole is, right? A mixture of our language, a mixture of our culture,
right,
which is very unique. And I think that's, in a way, we have the knowledge of knowing that this is our base. Many folks left there and went to different islands in the Caribbean and so forth, and may not know where their islands that they came from or where in Africa, but we're fortunate to know that that's the base of where our history is.
right. It's similar to when you hear the term Creole, right? And sometimes people use that term as like the French Creole, for instance. So Creole, so Creole or Criolla, it comes from that Creole. So like Eva said, that sort of that mixture, and we're this, African Portuguese sort of mixture from our roots. That's where we start, right? We start with that mixture, and then all these other ethnicities are kind of poured into there because of where Cape Verde was located, and then of the history of colonialism and all of the different things that have kind of brought all of these different peoples to Cape Verde for these branches to kind of move to spread out. So yes, it's it comes from that. It comes from that
different branch, like French Creole, the Spanish Creole, the Portuguese Creole, all different. I Googled Cape Verdean women singers because I wanted to find out more. And I came across a tradition where the women, when the men were away, would sing at their homes about, carrying on, doing the work with them. Are you familiar with that tradition?
Is that Batuk? Are you talking
yes,
about Batuk?
Batuk.
Yeah.
It was so beautiful and just vibrant. I loved it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's a form of it's sort of a form of a women's communal. It comes out of the women's community deep. So this is a tradition that comes more from, I would say, our African side, and again, it's where the women are the ones in the community who kind of keeps the community together, and in this particular way they do it through music, and they bring the women together. They have the rhythm, so there's a rhythm that goes along with the Batuk. There's a rhythm of the Batuk, and then there's a speaking, they call it Financion, and it's a way of bringing everyone together, making sure that everyone is thriving through this musical communal participation, and it goes back. It's very ancient and goes back to our African roots, and it was kept alive by the women in the islands, inner islands of Santiago. And I do write about one woman. That's probably what you're coming from, Nacia Gomez. She passed away several years ago now, but she, right up until when she passed, she was, sort of the pillar of the Batuk, and speaking and writing and talking about all of these different things, and it was almost a form of rap in a sense. If you had to if you had to sort of compare it to something, it's not, obviously it's not the same, but if you had to compare it to something, it's very similar in that kind of sense. But she, she was known throughout Cabo Verde for her artistry, and she was just, just a regular woman you know, taking care of the community, but she was known throughout Cabo Verde for how strong she was. And Amilcar Cabral, who is our sort of our Martin Luther King Jr., right? So he called upon her to help to bring the Batuque forward in the 1970s as they were going through the independence struggle. So she did a lot to strengthen Cabo Verdean culture through music.
And as you say that, you made me think of, you know, during the movement with Cabral and the PACG movement, that many of the women would sing to keep the morale of the soldiers and to keep, you know, the space a little bit more uplifted, and through song, people connected, and there's powers in song, as we know. So that's another way that the women contributed to the movement in many ways.
Yeah, it's very distinctive, and it's a cappella type of singing. I was quite taken by it. I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the last, I don't know, couple of years now, everybody knows Madonna, right? So I guess Madonna was interested through some work that she was doing with some Cape Verdean artists, and she actually went to Cabo Verde, and she did a video with the Batucadeiras. So it's interesting that now it's sort of starting to come even more forward, and it's great that, you know, I'm glad that she was able to do that, but we need to, you know, continue that exploration of the culture and the history, because it's so rich. There's so much there that people don't know.
Eva, in the introduction to your poem, you mentioned that social justice and activism are two of the themes that are often reflected in your work. Where does that come from, and why is that important to you?
Where does that come from? I came from a home that my parents were in Cape Verde during the PACV movement, and so they were there during the struggle of Cabral and independence. So that seed of social justice has always been planted in me from stories I've heard from my parents. You know, as with any movement, similar to Martin Luther King here and there, yes, Cabral was the central figure, but there was many folks here in the United States and there that supported, either with petitions or doing some sending secret messages and so forth. So I hear kind of those stories from my dad. And then my mom was a teacher in Cape Verde prior to the independence, excuse me, I'm switching the languages. And then afterwards, and talking about how that transition as a teacher to go from now having to teach all children, because prior from independence, children didn't have to go to school, and how that impacted. So the seed of social justice has been planted in me as in my family. And I think the work of art is always embedded in social justice. It's a way that throughout history, we have used it to highlight issues of injustice, of crimes, of anything that's happening to humanity that needs to be voiced through our songs, through our poetry. So I always try to infuse that. And if you're going to talk about Cape Verdean culture, they go one-on-one with each other. We're talking about women and injustices that occur and continue to occur, you know, within domestic violence, within the lack of some feminist thoughts and some critical issues that are happening in Cape Verde. So those things always need to be addressed.
Yeah.
So
I imagine they need to be addressed on this side of the Atlantic, as well as in Cape Verde. With the Cape Verdean diaspora here, there are issues.
absolutely. There's always, you know, and it's always an uphill battle. And I think art is one of the ways that we can do it in a way that may be less abrasive, but still bring the issues up. So poetry, I always try to weave in topics that I think are very important in that.
Do you think that there is a Cape Verdean way of doing things, a Cape Verdean culture that is particularly reflected in your poetry or your singing, Candida, that makes it different? In other words, just that you would recognize it as, oh, I see the Cape Verdean influence here.
I know for me, I try to, as best I can, embrace and infuse the Cape Verdean culture into my artwork. You know, I speak of the word morabaza in one of the poems, which is something that it's really hard to translate into an American word because it's so encompassing of so many things. It's the smile that someone gives you when, you know, they know you're Cape Verdean. It's that hug. It's that grandmother's, you know, one of my lines of poem is a grandmother's kiss on the forehead when you're about to leave, and knowing that that kiss is, you know, is going to stay with you. It's a blessing that's going to stay with you. It's, you know, the madna, that feeling of like in your soul that I just love this wholeness. And so that's things that you can't put your finger on, and art is the best way to do that. That space that is nonlinear, but still felt in the soul. And I do my best to try to encompass that in my poetry and in my art, to feel that if I'm not in Cape Verde, but this is that wholesomeness that I can try to grab onto.
Candida?
Yeah, she took the word right out of my mouth, as morabaza. That's the first thing that comes to my mind when someone asks me what is it that is within me that comes out in my music, because I don't always necessarily, you know, I definitely want to always bring forth, you know, what makes me me, and understanding that my, you know, my Cape Verdeanness, my Criolla, the Criolla that is deep within me. Sometimes I didn't even know that was there. I had to, you know, so I had to kind of rediscover it. But what I know is what it is that the beauty that comes from within, that morabaza, that warmth, that love, that and I'm actually getting ready to do a talk about embracing morabaza, the Cape Verde, what am I calling it? Embracing morabaza, the Cape Verdean's connection to spirit, because that's what for me, in my spiritual journey as a Cape Verdean, as a Black woman, as a spiritual seeker, like all of these things sort of come together, and it's that Cape Verdean essence that is within me that animates all of that, and so I hope that that's what comes out in my music, whether I'm singing, you know, a Cape Verdean song or whether I'm singing an American song. I hope that that's what comes out. And that's what people hear.
I, as a kid, I listened to the musical group Tavares, and even as a young kid, I knew that there was something different about them, that it wasn't completely African American, it wasn't completely European, Eurocentric music. It was just something different, and I think that it's hard for me to articulate it, but I think that there is a uniqueness to it. Do you think that there a lot of people, I think, are just not even aware of Cabo Verde and the country, and you know, here in New Bedford we are. Are there things that can be done to raise consciousness about it?
I think just doing what we're doing right now. It's like continuing to just be unapologetic about speaking about Cabo Verde, as small as it is. You know, I mean, at any given point, you know, the islands themselves can carry maybe 500 to 600,000 people at one time. So in the scheme of the world, yes, it's small. What do they say? You know, 10 little dots in the ocean, but it's up to us, those of us who know that then those 10 little dots mean so much more and are so much bigger than people know and what people understand. It's up to us to educate others. And I know that's my mission, is if I can educate one person at a time about, you know, where Cabo Verde is, even if I just show someone that, well, this is where Cabo Verde is. See these see these islands off the coast of Senegal? That's where Cabo Verde is. That's the Republic of Cabo Verde. And if I can just implant that, then there's hopefully the interest of, okay, well, who are these people, and you know, what are they about, and what do they do, and where did they come from, and it gives some, hopefully it'll give someone the idea to look further into it. And then so when you have one person who's learning, then another person is learning, and another, and they're giving that, they're passing that information, and they're passing that knowledge on to someone else. So you never know. I mean, it just takes, from, one to one to one to one. And that's all we can really do is don't hide our light under a bushel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree. I feel that, we have our unique culture, our unique identity within the Cape Verdean culture, but as we share that, as Candida said, unapologetically, and continue to share our stories, we're reflecting one another. Our stories are unique to Cape Verde, but it's a story of culture. It's a story of longing, and we all have that. And to a certain extent, people have migrated and so they can relate, and we reflect each other and bring a sense of community when we share our art, when we share our stories. Every time I've gone to places, they don't, oh, wow, that's interesting. And then they start to see how that can maybe relate to them. And we have a commonality found somewhere. You don't have to be Cape Verdean to have a love for that culture, because it transcends just the identity of Cape Verde as well.
Yeah. And I think as artists who are well known, identify themselves as Cape Verdean, who will, help more and more people know about it. Are there other aspects about the importance of this book and the beginning of this scholarship that I haven't asked about that you think are important to speak about? Topics you'd like to talk about today?
Well, to me, I think one of the reasons this book is so important, it's continuing to tell the stories for generations and generations, because what can happen and has happened in the past is that stories get lost and cultures get watered down. And so, and I mentioned that in my book of nostata, right? And saying that one of the lines I say is, put this conta de hoje around your soul. What the conta de hoje is a necklace that is known to protect you and be like an om to protect you from evil or bad things, so that we are intentional in telling our stories. We're intentional in sharing this culture, because if we don't, then the next generation or 2 generations will not know it. So that's our work, to continue to shine these stories and shine these lights. So some child that here is maybe 2nd, 3rd generation understands that they're still connected, although they may not speak the language or may not have been born there, that they still have that lineage, that poderosa within them, or that poderoso within them. And that's something to really uplift and uphold. And maybe that's what that person needs, that maybe feels like, I don't have something I'm connected to, but yes, and they may express it in a different way. Maybe it's through a rap, maybe it's through something different in their own artistic or way of being, but to know that that's part of them is so important. And some people have lost that, and some people are searching for that. And that's why these stories need to be told.
Yeah. What is the name of your book again, Iva?
Eva, it's here. It's Essence, Tones, Whispers, and Shouts. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
But it's a compilation of different poems, and many of them speak to the Cape Verdean culture and the beauty that it carries.
The other thing I wanted to also say too, in terms of the book itself, is that for us to really understand that it's a scholarly compilation of these women that have done such amazing work. I mean, doctors and lawyers, and so it's a way to add to the academic canon of work on culture and women and Blackness and all of the different things that people are learning about when they're in, say, an Africana studies or world studies or cultural studies or ethnic studies or any of those things. This is a book that's going to be, and it should be added to sort of the readings of all of these things to add to the knowledge, because for so long, there's been maybe scatterings of scholarship, and so we just need to continue to add to that, so that when somebody is researching Cape Verdean women or Cape Verdean culture or African, African migration. They also can see and how all the intersectionalities of everything. This book is also available for that research as well.
Yeah, I agree. It is a very scholarly book, and it does take a while to get into, but if you give it a chance and you keep plodding through it, you will find out a huge number of things about Cabo Verde that you didn't know, and it will knit together for you, I think, what the Cape Verdean experience is in America. I'm just going to show it one more time. I don't know if I can, if Cabo Verdean Women Writing Remembrance, Resistance and Revolution, Criollas Poderosas, edited by Teresa Silva Lima Neves and Amina Fernandez Pilgrim, and try to get it close enough for you to see it.
Yeah, and I'd like to just, if I may, so because there's importance in a name, right? So I just want to say the name. Her name, it's Teresa, Terza, Teresa, A. Silva Lima Neves, and Amina Fernandez Pilgrim.
Yeah, I apologize for that. Right?
Oh no, it's okay.
Okay. European pronunciation.
That's okay.
Yeah. Thank you both, Candida and Eva, for talking to me. I'll write a column to go along with this piece, and people can look at this video. It's been great fun, and I hope the first of many things we'll do together.
Thank you, Mr. Spillane, Jack. Thank you so much for, it's an honor to be able to have this platform with you and with my sister friend, Miss Eva, such a talented woman, Criolla, and it's always a pleasure to be in the same space with you, my dear. I guess I'm looking at the camera, looking at you over here. But yeah, it's always a pleasure to be in the same space. So thank you, Jack, for honoring us with this time. Thank you.
Thank you,
Jack, so much. It's beautiful to be with my other Poderosa sister, Candida, and to share this story. So I'm greatly appreciative of that.
Go Poderosas.
Yay.
There you go.
Viva Cabo Verde.
Viva Cabo Verde.
Bye-bye.